These instructions will guide the viewer through the steps of installing the standard EPRI RF monitor base station on a lattice structure. The installation process includes the attachment of the cabinet, auxiliary weather mount, and solar panel in that sequence. Note that the solar panel is fragile and should be stored safely till installation. Be sure to follow all safety regulations and wear the required personal protective equipment. The base station can be ordered as a 110-volt AC or 220-volt AC powered or solar-powered. Solar-powered base stations should be installed at locations that will not be significantly shaded by towers, poles, buildings, vegetation, or hillsides. When selecting the mounting locations for the RF monitors and base station, consideration should be given to the location of the base station, as RF monitors should be within line of sight and less than 900 feet away or 300 meters. If line of sight is not possible, range will be reduced. For longer ranges or challenging installations, contact EPRI to discuss the possibility of using a repeater. Confirm that the solar panel will be able to face south in the northern hemisphere and north in the southern hemisphere. Major components: electronics cabinet and battery, auxiliary mount, solar panel. Required tools: 2 ratchet wrench handles, 3/4-inch sockets, 9/16-inch sockets, 1/2-inch sockets, 9/16-inch wrenches, inclinometer, cell phone app can be used, compass, cell phone app can also be used. Electronics cabinet installation. Electronics cabinet attachment hardware: 8 carriage bolts and lock nuts, 3/8, 2 hex bolts and lock nuts, 1/2 inch, 2 inner lattice mount brackets, 2 outer lattice mount brackets. Top lattice bracket attachment. Place an inner lattice mount bracket on the inside of the structure at the desired height for the top of the electronics cabinet. Attach an outer lattice mount to the inner lattice mount using 4 of the 3/8 carriage bolts and nylon lock nuts. Tighten the nylon lock nuts securing the lattice bracket assembly to the structure. Insert the 1/2-inch hex bolt into the hole on the outer lattice mount bracket. Electronics cabinet attachment. Hang the electronics cabinet using the top hole of the back plate on the 1/2-inch hex bolt installed in the previous step and secure the unit using a lock nut. Lower lattice bracket attachment. Secure the back plate to the remaining outer lattice mount using a 1/2-inch hex bolt and nylon lock nut and tighten the assembly. Attach the remaining inner lattice bracket using the 3/8 carriage bolts and lock nuts. Tighten both top and bottom lock nuts, securing the cabinet. Auxiliary mount and cellular antenna installation. The auxiliary mount holds the weather transducers and antennas. It can be installed up to 9 feet, 3 meters above the electronics cabinet depending on cable routes. The correct height and location for the mount is application specific and should be confirmed with EPRI beforehand. The magnetic mount cellular antenna can be installed up to 6 feet, 1.8 meters, above the cabinet depending on cable routing. In special cases, weather transducers and antennas may differ from the examples in this guide. Installation instructions for those specific variants will be provided as required. Auxiliary mount attachment hardware. 4 carriage bolts and lock nuts at 3/8 of an inch. 2 hex head bolts and lock nuts 3/8 of an inch. 2 inner lattice mount brackets. 2 outer lattice mount brackets. Auxiliary mounting plate with U-bolts. Mounting tube. RF antenna bracket. RF antenna and cable. Weather transducer and cable. Cellular antenna. Attachment of mounting plate to brackets. Attach the mounting plate to the 2 outer lattice brackets using the 2 hex head bolts and lock nuts. Attachment of mounting plate to structure. Mount the assembly from the previous step to the structure at the selected height. Use the inner lattice brackets and 4 carriage bolts and lock nuts to secure the assembly. Auxiliary tube installation. Attach the tube to the auxiliary mount with the U-bolts and lightly tighten. The bent end of the tube must be positioned in the planned location for the weather transducer and be facing upwards. Aim to place the weather transducer in such a way that interference from nearby structure is minimized. Tube leveling. Level tube horizontally and vertically using an inclinometer. Tighten all the bolts on the auxiliary mount to lock the position. Weather transducer attachment. Attach the weather transducer to the tube using the included U-bolt. Tighten the U-bolt so that the transducer is firmly attached but can still be rotated. Weather transducer leveling and orientation. Using a compass, ensure that the N on the weather transducer is facing true north, and level the unit using the bubble level located on the bottom of the monitor. Tighten the U-bolt so that the transducer is firmly in place and cannot be rotated. Installation of RF antenna mount, antenna, and cable. Install the RF antenna bracket by attaching the U-bolt to the auxiliary mount tube. Attach the omnidirectional antenna to the top port of the connector. The antenna should be facing directly upwards. Attach the provided cable to the bottom of the connector. The antenna should be at least 1 foot or 30 centimeters from the weather transducer so that it does not impede wind flow. The antenna should also be away from the structure to maximize reception. Cellular antenna installation. The cell phone antenna with magnetic base can be attached to any piece of ferrous metal on the structure. Attach cell antenna as high as possible to optimize signal strength. In some cases, a metal bracket will be provided allowing the antenna to be attached to the auxiliary mount tube. 110 volt AC, 220 volt AC powered base station option. Cable and connector installation. Connect an AC power cable of the correct size and rating to the provided connector. The connector is then plugged into the cabinet as shown. Solar-powered base station option. Solar panel installation. Insert the support tube into the solar panel mount assembly. Using a compass, align the panel with true south in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, the panel should face true north. Tighten the lock nuts on the solar panel mount assembly to fix the solar panel's direction. Solar panel adjustment. The solar panel needs to be inclined to a specific angle to maximize power output throughout the year, but also to account for snowfall and reduced light in winter. Using an inclinometer, tilt the solar panel to the correct angle for the latitude at which the base station will be installed. The angle is measured from the horizontal plane. The correct inclination for different latitude ranges is shown in the figure. Secure the solar panel by tightening the bolts on each side of the bracket. Solar panel connection. Insert the solar panel cable gland into the hole on the side of the electronics cabinet. The sealing gasket should be on the outside. Tighten the connector firmly to the base station wall with a supplied gland nut. Ensure the gland is tightened snugly to provide a weather-tight seal. Connect the positive, red, and negative, black leads from the solar panel to the corresponding connections in the top compartment of the electronics cabinet. The connections are gender-specific to ensure correct wiring. Battery installation. Place the battery into the lower vented half of the cabinet and connect the positive, red, and negative, black leads as shown. The connections are gender-specific to reduce the ability to wire incorrectly. Base stations intended for low light environments are supplied with 2 batteries. In this case, connect the second battery in the same way as the first. External cable connections. Connect all the cables to the correct connectors on the side of the cabinet. Note the grounding lug of the weather transducer cable is connected to the connector for the cell antenna via a lock nut. The connections for the standard option include grounding cable, weather transducer cable, RF antenna cable, cellular antenna cable. Strap cables to structure. Fasten the cables using tie wraps to prevent them from moving in the wind and being damaged by vibration. Power up and status check. Battery circuit. Locate the 3 breakers inside the cabinet. Switch on the center breaker for the battery connection. Wait for 10 seconds, allowing the solar controller to power up. The battery status LEDs on the solar controller should be either green or yellow, showing the state of charge of the battery. Solar panel circuit. Switch on the left breaker, labeled as Array, for the solar panel connection. Wait for 10 seconds, allowing the solar controller to register. The charging status LED will be green if the sun is shining and charging the battery. Load circuit. Switch on the right breaker, labeled as load, to power on the electronics. It may take up to 5 minutes for the system to power up completely. Check the following status LEDs. RF receiver LEDs. The power and health LEDs on the RF receiver should be green. The LED may blink intermittently if the receiver is getting data from RF monitors nearby. Data logger LEDs. The red LED on the data logger should flash red on a regular interval every 10 to 30 seconds. Modem LEDs. The power and signal LEDs on the cellular modem will be lit when it's operating correctly. The signal LEDs indicate signal reception strength. Modem models may vary, and the LEDs could be difficult to see. Status LED troubleshooting. If any of the status LEDs on the solar controller, RF receiver, data logger, or cellular modem are not correctly lit as described above, try cycling the power by turning off the breakers, waiting 30 seconds, and turning them back on in sequence mentioned previously. If the battery status LED is red, the battery may be low in charge. If this continues for an extended period of more than a day, the battery is not charging correctly. Please contact EPRI to troubleshoot the issue. System operation check. Inform your EPRI-assigned contact when the installation is complete to initiate a check of the base station status and its functions. The connection between the base station and the EPRI server will be verified, as well as the connection to each RF monitor.